Hello, everybody. Jim here. Well, winter has arrived here in Michigan. It has been colder than bejesus out all weekend. Been working out in the cold, but I still managed to find time to see Star Wars Rogue One. Rogue One, a Star Wars story, but Star Wars Rogue One, I think, is what this movie really should have been called, so I'm just going to call it that. I always make time for Star Wars. And I really, really liked this movie. Many things about this movie were really, really awesome. Many things about it were what I really wanted from a Star Wars movie. And the fact that this really feels more like an original story, where you don't really see everything coming. I mean, obviously, you know the final resolution. That's given away, obviously, if you've seen A New Hope. But the way this movie gets there is actually doesn't follow the typical Hollywood formula of universe building to expand to this sequel or that sequel or this spin-off. This really feels like a standalone project, just a story set in the Star Wars galaxy. Kind of basically this movie is like an EU novel that was rendered onto the big screen, basically. You know how they would always have those books that would fill in all the time gaps between the movies, most of which Disney has now declared non-canon? Well, basically, it's like they took one of those and then they just made it into a movie. And that's absolutely fine. I was familiar that it was directed by the same guy who made the 2014 Hollywood Godzilla movie, a movie that did some things really well and a couple things not so well. And honestly, the same strengths and weaknesses of the 2014 Godzilla movie kind of crop up in this. The 2014 Godzilla movie was criticized for some of its human characters being a little on the bland side, a little unmemorable, and that's kind of the case right here. Like most of the characters, none of them are bad. I mean, there's no characters where you'll be like, oh God, shut up, or anything like that. But a lot of them are just kind of forgettable, to be honest. Like, I could barely walk out of the theater, only remember the names of just a few of them. You have this droid who's kind of like a cooler version of 3PO, who was pretty fun and really well designed, combination of practical and CGI effects. That was probably the most memorable character. Our main hero, she's perfectly interesting, and she, of course, has the typical story. Minor spoilers in this review of course, wanting to find her father, wanting to do what her father wanted her all her life after being separated from him. We've kind of seen that before, and it's done pretty well here. And you got a few other rebel characters she teams up with, and there's some really good action sequences. They're not the typical Star Wars action sequences. Like, there's no lightsaber battles in this movie. Yeah, Star Wars movie where there are no lightsaber battles. Alright, I mean, we do see towards the end someone ignite a lightsaber, but it's not like a lightsaber on lightsaber battle. There's none of that in this movie. And another thing this movie omits from the basic Star Wars formula is there's no opening crawl. This kind of a way that this movie separates itself from the main saga episodes. I guess the opening crawl is something they're saving for the main saga episodes, whereas the spin-off movies probably typically won't have those. But then again, the video games had them, and they weren't main saga episodes. Like every old video game I used to play in, like the PlayStation 2 and what have you, they always had an opening crawl just like the movies had, but this movie isn't worth that. Another thing I thought was lacking the musical score. This is also the first Star Wars movie where John Williams didn't come back to do a new musical score, and he'll apparently be back for Episode 8, but there's no real new John Williams score for this movie, and the music in it isn't bad. It's not something I would even really think of if this was the vast majority of other movies, really. But Star Wars movies have always been a massive, powerful symphony. I mean, say what you want about a movie like The Phantom Menace, for example, but the Duel of Fate score and the whole cinematography of the lightsaber battle was just awesome. And this movie is totally missing that. The musical score is totally ordinary Hollywood fare, not the level you expect from Star Wars. let's be honest, John Williams' phenomenal score really made all those movies, and without it, you do feel like something is missing. Another thing about this movie, and this was a huge strength of the 2014 Godzilla, the cinematography is absolutely excellent. Like, the first half is a little slow, but man, the end sequence is easily one of the best action sequences ever in a Star Wars movie. You kind of see the opening crawl, the line, the rebels have won their first victory against the Galactic Empire. So essentially this movie is like the opening crawl of A New Hope. Alright, and you really get a much better sense of that. You'll never watch A New Hope, read that opening crawl the same way again. You'll think of the end battle of Rogue One. Basically the battle, it's like what the Battle of Endor should have been. It's the battle for Endor, but without the Ewoks. Alright, so you're not seeing stormtroopers getting whacked over the head with a teddy bear with sticks and falling over like, we're a legion of our best troops, so who knew that they would have rocks? Alright, this feels like a much more realistic scene. Yeah, the stormtroopers still are kind of bad shots, and that's something you expect from Star Wars at this point. But it all feels like a much more realistic and grounded and gritty battle. It's like watching an old war movie, except with various science fiction elements, like with blasters and spaceships. But it almost has like a We Were Soldiers kind of feel, or Hacksaw Ridge kind of feel, but not as violent. The whole thing is really awesome. Vader gets a few moments, and this also, one thing I really need to talk about, one of the things that people have been talking about is this movie bringing back Peter Cushing, who played Admiral Tarkin in the original. The actor's been dead for over 20 years now, but they bring him back using realistic computer animation, alright, that apparently they got permission to do with his estate. They've tried this in a few other movies, not really, or I think they brought back dead actors in other movies, but never this successfully. Like, I remember in Tron Legacy 6 years ago, when you have like a real actor talking to a digital human who's trying to look realistic, it can be a tad off-putting. They call it the uncanny valley. And the technology has improved quite a bit, actually, since Tron Legacy. It's been 6 years since then, and you can tell it kind of still has that feel where when you have a live-action actor talking to a guy who's clearly a computer-rendered creation, it can be just a little off. Whereas if this was an animated movie where both characters are animated, it really wouldn't bother you as much. But when you cut from a real actor to a digital actor, it just isn't quite seamless. And it's not the fault of anyone responsible. The CGI in his face is really fantastic. But we're still a bit off from the day when it can truly be realistic, where you'll have a digital actor who will talk right in front of the camera and be indistinguishable from a real one. It's not a matter of if that'll happen, it's a matter of when. As technology improves, that is going to happen, but we're not quite there yet. It was a very interesting idea that thanks to modern technology, even death can't stop them from bringing an actor back that they need for the story. And I think that's going to be something that will happen a lot more in Hollywood movies in the future. Who knows? You could have like Marlon Brando, a digital Marlon Brando, like appear in like a Godfather reboot. That could happen someday. Quote me on it. If that happens in like 10 years, someone go back to this video, archive it, and say that Jim of Loudmouth Reviews predicted that would happen. So overall, if you're a Star Wars fan, going out and seeing this movie is pretty much a no-brainer, because this is a really good Star Wars movie. And I actually like it a bit better than The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens, of course, had a better musical score. It had more memorable characters as well. So there were some things I liked better about The Force Awakens, but I still just can't get over, after having rewatched it a few times, just how it really treads right over A New Hope's story beat for beat. A lot of other people have criticized that, and I'm among them. This really feels like a much more realistic... Sorry, wrong word. But feels like a much more original story. But that's still set in the Star Wars galaxy. It has elements that we should have gotten from The Force Awakens. Like the perfect Star Wars movie, one that would rival Empire, would have elements of both. But both are not perfect. Neither are the best Star Wars ever. Empire Strikes Back will still probably have that title for a long time, if not forever. but both are really good. And Disney, their first two efforts are incredibly, incredibly solid. And I really look forward to seeing what they can do in the future. Everyone have a great holiday season, and may the Force be with us all. Bye.